The frost crunched under Daniel Harper's boots as he stepped out of his truck and into the winter forest. A thick breath of cold air left his mouth like smoke, and he grinned to himself. This was exactly the kind of weekend he needed. No work calls, no city noise, just him, the trees, and the promise of a good hunt. Daniel wasn't new to this. Ever since he was a teenager, he had loved the wilderness. He wasn't just a camper. He was a hunter, a fisherman, and someone who took pride in being able to survive with minimal supplies. His friends used to call him the guy who could live through the end of the world. But for this trip, he was alone. He liked it that way. No one to slow him down. No one to tell him which direction to go. Just him and nature, like it was meant to be. The forest was silent, except for the distant rustle of wind through branches. Daniel unloaded his gear: a sturdy tent, sleeping bag, portable stove, hunting rifle, and a small cooler. The snow was light enough to walk through without sinking, but heavy enough to paint the whole landscape white. He picked a spot near a frozen stream, not too deep in the woods, but far enough from the dirt road that no one would stumble across his camp by accident. It was late afternoon when he finished setting up the tent and stacking firewood. The sun hung low, casting long, cold shadows across the ground. He checked his watch, just enough time for a quick hunt before darkness settled in. Grabbing his rifle, Daniel headed deeper into the forest. His boots left clean tracks in the snow, and every crunch of ice seemed louder in the stillness. About 20 minutes in, he spotted movement. A rabbit darting between bushes. He crouched, aimed, and took the shot. The crack of the rifle echoed, then faded into the silence. Dinner was sorted. By the time Daniel returned to camp, the sky was a deep navy blue and the temperature had dropped. He lit the campfire, the flames dancing and popping as they chewed through the dry wood. He skinned the rabbit, seasoned it lightly, and set it to cook over the fire. The smell of roasting meat filled the clearing, mingling with the sharp scent of pine. That's when he heard it, a sound, faint, distant, like someone walking through the snow. Daniel paused, listening. Nothing. He shrugged it off as an animal and went back to turning the meat. The fire crackled. The forest whispered with wind. Then the sound came again. Crunch, pause, crunch. This time it was closer. Daniel set down the fork and reached for his rifle. Probably just a deer, he muttered under his breath, but the hair on the back of his neck stood on end. The sound stopped. The woods went still. He waited, eyes scanning the tree line. Nothing moved. After a tense minute, he lowered the rifle, telling himself not to overthink it. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was out there, watching. Daniel tried to shake off the unease as he ate, but every crunch of snow in his own movements made him listen harder, just in case. The fire was warm against the icy air, but beyond its glow, the forest looked like an endless wall of black. He finished the rabbit, tossing the bones into the fire so scavengers wouldn't come sniffing around. Then he zipped up his jacket and stood, scanning the trees once more. Silence. No wind now, no rustling branches, just stillness. The kind that makes you feel like the whole world is holding its breath. Daniel told himself he was imagining things. After all, he had camped alone dozens of times. Strange noises were part of the experience. You either ignored them or let them eat you alive from the inside. Still, he found himself checking the rifle chamber, making sure a round was ready. He placed it right next to his sleeping bag, inside the tent, before crawling in. The tent felt small, almost too small, the thin fabric separating him from the endless cold outside. He clicked off his flashlight, closed his eyes, and listened to his own heartbeat. For a while, nothing happened. His mind began to drift. Then, crunch. This time, it was unmistakable. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling the tent. Daniel froze. His breath fogged inside the sleeping bag. He reached for the rifle, but stopped halfway. The footsteps had stopped too. "Hello?" His voice was low, uncertain. No answer. The air inside the tent suddenly felt colder, heavier. His pulse was in his throat now. He sat there for minutes, staring at the dark outline of the tent wall, half expecting a shadow to pass over it, but nothing came. Eventually, he lay back down, though sleep was impossible. He must have been awake for hours, listening for every little sound. Sometime in the dead of night, exhaustion finally took him. When he woke, the fire had burned down to glowing embers, and pale morning light was filtering through the tent. Relieved to see daylight, Daniel unzipped the flap and froze. Around his camp, in the fresh snow, were footprints, human footprints. They didn't lead toward his camp from any direction. They started at the edge of his tent, circled it twice, and then vanished into the trees. No trail leading in, no trail leading out, just there. Daniel's gut tightened. He'd seen animal prints vanish in snowdrifts before, but not human, and these weren't small. Whoever had been walking out there was tall. He scanned the tree line again, his breath clouding in front of him. The forest looked normal, but he couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on him. He decided to pack up early and move deeper into the forest, toward a hunting spot he'd used years ago. Maybe he could lose whatever, or whoever, had been here last night. As he walked, rifle in hand, he couldn't help but notice something unsettling. The deeper he went, the quieter it got. No bird calls, no rustle of squirrels, just the crunch of his boots and the sound of his own breathing. Daniel trekked deeper into the forest, each step crunching against the thin crust of snow. The cold bit at his cheeks, but that wasn't what made his skin tighten. It was the silence. A forest should be alive with sound, even in winter. Here, the air felt wrong. After about an hour of hiking, he reached the old hunting spot he'd remembered, a small clearing surrounded by a natural ring of pine trees. In the center stood the remains of an old wooden hunting platform, its ladder half-rotted, its boards sagging under years of neglect. "This will do," he muttered, more to convince himself than anything. He set up camp quickly, pitched the tent, gathered fallen branches for firewood, and even hung a few strips of jerky in a nearby tree to air out. The sun was already sinking, bleeding faint orange light through the frosted branches. Daniel wanted to get in one more round of hunting before nightfall, so he loaded the rifle and moved quietly through the woods. His boots crunched softly over patches of ice, his breath pluming in slow, steady bursts. About 20 minutes in, he spotted movement, a deer grazing by the edge of a frozen stream. He raised the rifle, steadied his aim, finger curling around the trigger snap. A branch broke somewhere behind him. He froze, the deer lifting its head, ears flicking nervously. Daniel didn't move. He slowly turned his head toward the sound. Nothing, just trees. The deer bolted, white tail flashing as it disappeared into the woods. "Great," he whispered under his breath. Still gripping the rifle, he backed toward camp, every step measured. Halfway back, he noticed something strange on the ground. More footprints. Not his, not boot prints either. Bare feet. Daniel's pulse thudded in his ears. The tracks were long, narrow, and spaced far apart, as though whatever made them, was taking unusually long strides. The weirdest part, the prints were fresh. No snow had fallen over them, and they were heading toward his camp. Daniel's pace quickened. By the time he reached the clearing, dusk had swallowed the forest, and shadows pooled thick between the trees. His firewood pile looked undisturbed, the tent exactly where he left it, but the flap was open. He hadn't left it open. The temperature inside the tent felt colder than outside. Daniel swept his flashlight beam over the sleeping bag, untouched. The rifle in his hands felt heavier. Then he saw it. In the snow, right next to his tent, was something lying half-buried. He crouched, brushed away the frost, and found a dead rabbit. Its neck was broken clean, and its body was still warm. There were no bite marks, no blood, just broken. Daniel's breath came faster now. He dropped the rabbit and backed away, his eyes scanning the tree line. Somewhere out there, hidden in the black between the pines, something moved, not walking, not running, just shifting, watching. By the time Daniel lit the fire, night had swallowed the forest completely. The flames licked upward, casting jagged shadows that twisted and danced against the snow. He sat cross-legged beside the heat, trying to shake the image of those bare footprints and the broken-neck rabbit from his mind. The fire crackled, the only sound in an otherwise suffocating silence. Even the wind seemed to have stopped, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Daniel cooked a small portion of the jerky with beans in his camp pot. The food's smell felt almost too strong in the stillness. A beacon. Halfway through eating, he froze. Snap. A branch broke again, this time closer. He grabbed the rifle instantly, his eyes darting into the black curtain beyond the firelight. The forest looked like a wall, pitch black, endless, unbroken. Probably a fox, he told himself quietly, though his voice cracked. Another sound followed, not a snap, but a slow, deliberate crunch of snow. Like footsteps, Daniel's skin crawled. He stood, rifle shouldered, scanning the tree line. "Hello," he called, his breath turning to mist. "If someone's there, this isn't funny." Silence. The fire popped loudly, making him flinch. He took a step back toward the tent, keeping the rifle raised. Then, movement. Something tall stepped between two trees, just far enough into the firelight for him to catch the shape. His brain scrambled to process it. Too tall to be human, limbs long and narrow, head tilted unnaturally to one side. Before he could react, it slipped back into darkness. Daniel's heart hammered in his chest. He swung the rifle in that direction and fired. The blast echoed violently, bouncing between the trees, but when the ringing in his ears faded, there was nothing. No scream, no thud, no running, just the fire crackling. Daniel stayed awake for hours, sitting beside the flames, with the rifle across his lap. The forest never made another sound. Eventually, exhaustion pulled at him, and against his better judgment, he retreated into the tent. He zipped the flap fully and kept the rifle right beside the sleeping bag. For a while, his eyes stayed open, watching the orange flicker of the dying fire through the tent's thin fabric. Sometime deep into the night, the sound returned. Not footsteps this time, breathing, slow, heavy, and just outside the tent wall. Daniel's body locked up. The breathing was so close, he could almost feel the tent fabric moving with each exhale, slow, deliberate, like whatever was out there wanted him to know it was listening. He didn't dare move. Every survival instinct screamed at him to stay perfectly still. His own breath felt deafening in his ears, mixing with the muffled thump of his heartbeat. The sound circled the tent, first near his feet, then the side where his head lay. It stopped. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, the faint sound of a finger dragging slowly down the nylon wall. Daniel's throat went dry. He reached for the rifle as quietly as possible, inching his hand along the sleeping bag. The noise outside shifted, a shuffle in the snow, a soft thud, and then nothing. Minutes passed. Or maybe it was hours. Time didn't feel real anymore. He kept the rifle aimed at the flap, eyes fixed, every muscle ready to pull the trigger. At some point, exhaustion claimed him again, but it wasn't peaceful sleep. It was a restless, twitching drift. A sudden metallic clink jolted him awake. He sat up instantly. The fire outside had burned down to weak embers, casting a faint red glow over the camp. The sound came again, a hollow knock from the direction of his supply bag. "Hell no," he whispered. Daniel unzipped the flap slowly and peeked outside. His supply bag was gone. It was 20 feet away, sitting upright in the snow, as if someone had gently placed it there, and right beside it, footprints, human, bare, leading away into the blackness. That's when he noticed something else. The rifle trembled in his hands, not from cold, from the realization that the footprints weren't heading away from camp. They were circling it. Daniel's breath came in short bursts, puffing white into the frozen air. The footprints, pale impressions in the snow, wove around the camp in looping patterns, doubling back in places like whoever made them had been pacing, watching. His eyes darted to the tree line. Every shadow looked alive. Every branch seemed to bend in unnatural angles. He stepped out fully, boots crunching on snow, rifle aimed. His instincts screamed, "Get in the tent, get in the truck, get out of here." But some part of him wanted to see what was out there, maybe to prove to himself it was just some person messing with him. The footprints veered toward a dense cluster of pines. As Daniel crept closer, the smell hit him, a sour, metallic rot that churned his stomach. He swallowed hard, edging toward the dark gap between the trees. A sound came from inside. Not footsteps, not breathing, humming. A low, tuneless hum, like a child trying to remember a melody. Daniel froze. His finger tightened on the trigger. "Who's there?" he shouted, his voice breaking. The humming stopped. Then, from the darkness, a voice answered, calm and almost amused. "You shouldn't have come alone." Something shifted in the shadows, tall and thin, the same crooked head he'd glimpsed before. This time, it stepped forward, just enough for the dying moonlight to catch its face. If it could be called a face. The skin was stretched too tightly over its skull, lips drawn back as though frozen mid-scream. Its eyes were wide, unblinking, black pits that seemed to drink in the firelight from camp. Daniel stumbled back, raising the rifle. He fired, once, twice, 3 times, the blasts echoing like thunder. The figure didn't fall. It didn't even flinch. It only tilted its head further, like a curious animal, before melting backward into the pines, the humming resuming as it vanished into darkness. Daniel didn't stop running until he was back at the tent, shoving everything into his pack with shaking hands. Within minutes, he was in the truck, engine roaring to life, headlights slicing through the night. He didn't look in the mirrors. He didn't want to see if it was following. The road out of the forest was long, winding, and covered in patches of ice. His heart pounded the whole way. By the time he hit the highway, the first hints of dawn were bleeding into the sky. Daniel never went camping alone again. In fact, he never set foot in that forest at all. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind is quiet and the world feels too still, he swears he hears that same low humming just beyond the edge of his property. And he knows whatever was in those woods still remembers him.